Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Bet UK is empowering the everyday wins, cheeky grins, big conversations, budding aspirations. Our goal? To make EdTech accessible and teaching exceptional. Join the global education community on the 24th to the 26th of January 2024 as we make education better together. Tick it off your Christmas list today. Get your free ticket before the 13th of December deadline. Visit www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this pop-up space where we are hopefully going to be discussing the outcomes from today's coroner's report involving the death of Ruth Perry. Sorry about that, that's my sound. Apologies. So we are going to hopefully just go through, first of all, the finer details from that verdict that has just come out in the last hour via the BBC and via Bramwell Jeffries. So what I'm going to sort of reference is a mixture of sources between the BBC, Schools Week, and so I'm going to read from a variety of sources on this. This is what Bramwell Jeffries said happened today. So she said that to begin with, Heidi Connor, who was the coroner, started to summarise and give her report and findings on what happened. She firstly reminded members of the press about the Samaritans guidelines and IPSO, which is why we do not, the BBC, report the exact details of suicides. Heidi Connor reminded everyone that Ruth Perry was the head teacher for a primary school and children have access to news. Heidi Connor said that she was very clearly in this matter, the family would have been at a disadvantage without lawyers. We know that they crowd-funded all the money for this. That was a well-publicised campaign led by the family of Ruth Perry, which I believe raised I think it was something like £60,000 or something along those lines was raised in a very short period of time to provide the legal aid for this process. Bramwell then went on and said that, and Heidi Connor then went on and said that the scope of the inquest had included detailed consideration of the Ofsted inspection and whether there was a causal link to Ruth Perry's mental health deterioration and death. And then she started to give her verdicts. So to begin with, she started to talk about how Ofsted inspections work. She set out the different grades that can be awarded within an inspection and the overall grade. Any of our listeners who are listening back to this, that would be inadequate, requires improvement, good, and outstanding. So in the UK, Ofsted inspections are conducted over a 2-day period usually, and then at the end of those, a grading is given in a single word judgment. She then explained that for a school like Caversham Primary, an inadequate grade would usually lead to an academisation order. She elaborated on the limiting judgment attached to safeguarding. She set out that a school judged inadequate just on safeguarding would be treated just the same as a school found to be failing in many areas. She says she heard no concerns about anyone but the conduct of the lead inspector, Alan Derry. Mr. Derry gave evidence that he received very extensive training, which was continually removed. From the moment of the first conversation between Mr. Derry and Ruth Perry in the first call, the coroner says there was a difference in interpretation. Mr. Derry said Ruth Perry seemed confident on the advance call. Her colleague said afterwards she seemed panicky ahead of the visit. She then moved on. On balance, Heidi Connor says she believed only one person was allowed to attend meetings with Ruth Perry and the lead inspector. She turns to the meetings on the first day in the morning and at lunchtime, and the chair with the chair of governors on second day, plus final ones. Heidi Connor says day one, the meeting was attended by a colleague, Miss Leroy, and Mrs. Perry with the lead inspector. Alan Derry described her as tearful and paused. The coroner says she accepts this. Hi, Dave. You okay?
Yeah, hey, okay.
Yeah, I've just started to read through the verdict. I'll continue that in a moment, but I know I've got limited time with you, so I just wanted to ask your immediate reaction to the coroner's report.
Do you know, I don't know what I feel. I think, if anything, I just feel absolutely gutted, and quite angry that, it's confirmed what we all knew, that Ofsted is linked to Ruth Perry's death. It feels really raw. I'm trying to consider what, it's just not right. We all know what it does to our own mental health, to that of our colleagues. We have talked about it for such a long time. And I just hope that something changes now, because I hate, feeling what it does to me and seeing what it does to my colleagues. It has to change. The link is so clear and so strong. There's part of me wants to turn around and say, they're not coming in until there's some changes made. And I appreciate Flora did that, and there was all sorts of things happened, around that time, and you can't do whatever. But it's not right. Something has to change now. If it doesn't change now, then I just can't process the idea that nothing will change, because it has to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's been a long process to get to this point for the family, for the friends of the family, and so on and so forth. So it should be. There will be those who should say that it should be a monumental moment. This should be a monumental moment in the reform of Ofsted. What do you want to see off the back of this now?
I think it should be paused. I mean, I don't know whether that would ever happen, but I think there should be paused. I think it should be suspended until things change and systems are put in place to support, you know, senior leaders, teachers, the process for deferring or pausing inspections, the supports out there, the one word judgment. It quite clearly needs to change. And some of the things that Amanda Spielman came out with in the week leading up to the inquest. It's just not okay. We all know that it's not okay. And I think for the first time, the seal has been broken. I've never seen so many people speaking up so openly and courageous. It shouldn't be courageous to speak up about things that we know need to change. Yeah, so it just feels really raw. I found myself thinking yesterday on my drive home, Ruth Perry should be on her way home this morning. She should be on her way to school, and she isn't. Family being deprived of a mum, of a wife, a daughter. I just can't process it. It's just what we all knew. Sorry, I feel really emotional about it all. I feel quite angry and I feel quite gutted about it all. And you can feel that already. I've only had 5 or 10 minutes to digest it all,
Yeah.
but you can feel that outpouring online. Something has to change. I hope the unions speak up on our behalf. Things have never been more tough in schools. We've all got more challenging behaviour. We're all struggling to get access to special needs provision and support and things like that. It's never been tougher. I really hope that our unions now, get really involved and say, This cannot carry on like it is. Let's stop. Let's regroup. Let's make it a force for good. Let's make the accountability. Nobody denies that we need accountability, but let's do it in a meaningful, in a supportive way that gets rid of the unpredictability, the unfairness of it all. It absolutely, I can't even comprehend the idea that it won't change, because it has to. But do it now, not when more people have left their job, more people's health or lives have been ruined by it. And I don't think I'm over egging it. Let's make the changes now.
Do you think that it will happen? Do you think change will happen now, or do you think this is just another
I think
thing?
I think it will happen. I think it has to happen. I just hope that it's it's imminent. Pause it now. Just pause it. We've quite clearly got evidence of the impact that it has on individuals. Pause it now. Regroup. Let's make it a real force for good. I think it has to. I just hope it's done soon. Much sooner rather than later, and more people have left the profession and more damage is being done.
Yeah. What? Because there's been a bit of a build up, I guess, to this coroner's report today. That included sort of there was the Amanda Spielman interview on BBC Radio 4. There's been sort of more noise, I guess, than usual leading up to it, both in the media and obviously Amanda Spielman went on Radio 4 as well to talk about this. Do you think that from an Ofsted perspective, do you think that what's their sort of, what are they thinking in this situation now? I wonder whether with a new chief inspector coming in, will they be attempting to sort of brush this one off?
I don't see how they can. You think of how you deal with situations in school or when you're leading something. The right thing, you try to do the right thing, and the right thing to do in the situation is to pause. I look back on that Woman's Hour interview, and the idea that we used in the Ruth Perry, inquest and death is a pivot. I mean, it's disgraceful. It is
Mm,
absolutely appalling. And the idea that there's a few of us online whipping up the
mm,
anxiety. Well, I think we've got quite clearly online. People are speaking up. The coroner is found out. It's said what has happened. I just feel I can't comprehend that this is it's what we all
yeah,
know. The idea that it's just a couple of us whipping up anxiety. No, it's leadership. It's speaking up for our colleagues and for our schools who are really affected by Ofsted and what happens during and after it. Sorry, I'm clear. I feel like you can sense that I feel really strongly about it, and
absolutely.
I'm just trying to process that somebody has died linked to Ofsted. I'm sure on another day I'll be a bit more articulate than I am now, but you can feel it online. There's a real massive emotional
Yeah.
outpouring that this should never have happened.
Yeah. I mean, you say that, Dave, in terms of, the feeling online and everything else, but there are those who have defended Ofsted, who've been completely sort of silent on these issues since the death of Ruth Perry. What would you say to those people who almost haven't done anything or said anything, or actually the people who've defended the inspectorate, who sort of continue to, whether inadvertently or directly, promote Ofsted inspections in their current form? What would your message be to them? Because you're a head teacher, so you're in, you've been in those situations, what the what's at stake, and all those things. So what would your message be to them?
Um, I've thought about this, and normally I'd be a bit more vanilla about it. I think they're deluded. I don't know whether they're safeguarding their own position. They're thinking further down the line and what they might get out of it. I don't know whether some of them are completely blinkered and blind to it. Maybe that is the case. And actually there are lots of good inspectors out there. I have had positive experiences with some brilliant
Yeah.
inspectors who were lovely and who got it, but we cannot allow the small number of it to do the damage that they do. I just hope everybody takes a long hard look at things and makes some just how has it been allowed to get to this point? We've known this for years. We've known this for absolute years. I just hope
Mhm.
that the ones who say they want to be a positive force for good, I hope they're kicking and screaming, saying that we need to do things different.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something like 10 deaths now that have been directly, I say been, alleged to have been directly attributed. I'm not sure if this is the first one, though, that
See,
has gone to this sort of level, and they've actually said, this is it. Do you know what I
But
mean?
but it's not just that. It's how many people are on antidepressants. I've been
Yeah,
quite honest about being on them
absolutely.
at times when we're in the window. But how many people have got heart conditions? I've started monitoring my heart rate variability, my heart rate, and you can see what it's doing to us. There are so many people affected by being in the window, and I can see what it does to staff. We don't really talk about Ofsted. We don't try and game the system. We just want to do the best for the kids. But you can feel it because they want to do a great job, get through Ofsted and whatever. It's it just has to change, doesn't it? It must. I think we should be saying they can't come in. I just, like I've said earlier, I hope that our unions, get involved and say that this isn't right.
I want to ask you, Dave. Don't feel like you need to answer this. Are you in a union now
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah. I don't mind. I don't mind. I'm in
Yeah,
ASCIL.
right. You're in ASCIL because
Yeah.
there is that sort of, and this is, by the way, this isn't the view of Teachers Talk Radio. This is just my sort of question or view coming through here. Is there will be those who would have said the unions haven't focused enough on, as a collective, on the sort of more, let's say, radical changes that are needed, that many would say are needed within Ofsted. They've complained about inspections and they've said, inspections cause this, but the changes we've seen between the death of Ruth Perry and now the day of the coroner's report have been piecemeal. They have been,
Yeah.
most commentators would say the changes have not been sufficient enough yet.
Yeah, I mean, this part of me has been, I've been talking about this over the last week. I've been hoping that the unions are waiting for the outcome, and now, they've been very quiet over the last week. I actually think that's been a respectful silence, waiting to find out what the outcome is, and I hope now that they speak up, they take some more action. I guess, in terms of over the last couple of years, there's been so many things to deal with within schools. You've had the
Yeah,
rack, the funding, the special
yeah.
needs, the behaviour, COVID catch up. And are our government up for radical solutions? Is this what is being needed? I don't know, but I just have this feeling, and it's a hope that the unions now say, do you know what, teachers, people who work in schools, they've got enough on at the moment. Let's pause. Let's regroup, rethink, and make it the positive force for change it could be.
Yeah. Listen, Dave, I know you've got a busy day. Really appreciate you coming on here.
Yeah,
And
no, it's fine. I'm going to go away and think, God, you got the emotional version of Dave, but it's
no, I
just
don't.
by the.
I don't
Do you know what
particularly.
it is? Do you know what I think it is? By the grace of God, Ruth Perry could have been me. It could have been one of my friends, one of my family, because I've sat there with colleagues, who look like a pale shadow of their former self because of the outcome of an Ofsted, or talking about their mental health and the issues they face of being in the window, praying for the right inspector. I think that's why we all feel so strongly about it. It
did
could have been one of our loved ones. It can't happen again.
did you think that the outcome would be what it is today? What were you after seeing
Um,
all the sort of commentary on it? Did you expect it to be as strong as it seems to be?
as the week went on, yeah, I did think it was going to be quite strong, but you don't know until that final outcome. And when you get news alerts saying that Ofsted contributed to the death of Ruth Perry, everybody else in the country's getting that. Whoever's got news alerts on, they're going to be getting that message, and hopefully they're speaking up on behalf of the children's schools. Suddenly it's become okay to talk about it, because we feared speaking up, didn't we, for triggering an Ofsted, bringing the school in, it's disrepute, getting into trouble. And the penny dropped a couple of months ago. How can we get into trouble for speaking up for the well-being
Mm.
of our colleagues? It's
Do
just
you think that's
madness.
been a serious issue in terms of heads, leaders,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
teachers on a granular level,
yeah,
thinking I better not say anything
yeah. But yeah,
publicly or
absolutely,
anywhere in case my
absolutely.
inspection?
Yeah, of course. And the idea that that you're going to feed back negatively when you've come out with the outcome you wanted on an Ofsted inspection. Absolutely. I just think for the first, I got frustrated at the beginning. I put like posts out there, thinking everybody gets this. They'll understand. We didn't even dare click like on it, and I know that because that used to be me. I wouldn't click like on
Really?
something. I certainly wouldn't repost. Whereas now, I think there is such a strength of feeling now, and I keep saying enough's enough. We're stronger together, and all sorts of other cliches like that. But yeah, I think
What
I think this is absolutely damning, and things must and will change. I just hope it's much sooner.
was it? Was it the death of Ruth Perry that made you change in your attitude to sort of publicly, like you say, clicking repost, clicking like, whatever? Was that the tipping point?
Um, I think part of it was speaking up for my colleagues, both near and far, head teachers and colleagues within schools. And actually, I felt empowered suddenly speaking up, because it's not okay. How can we get, like I said, how can we get in trouble for speaking up for it? It's only what we all know. I I don't know. I just can't believe I'm sat here talking to you about something that should have changed years ago. It's just madness.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, Dave, thanks so much. And try and have a good day.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, Dave. That was Dave McPartlin, who is a head teacher of a primary school and has been a vociferous campaigner for Ofsted reform, particularly since the death of Ruth Perry. Now, if you're just joining us, I was just reading through the verdict and the finer details of it, and actually sort of trying to capture some of that for you. So I'm going to continue with that now. I was looking at the first things that Heidi Connor said. She actually moved on and started to talk about there is no written guidance about how to manage head teachers' distress in Ofsted materials. And it was suggested by Heidi Connor, the coroner, that inspections can be paused if a head teacher is distressed. She later went on to say that the school and the local authority were not aware of that. So that was an interesting point that was made by Heidi Connor, that, Ofsted said that inspections could be paused, but no one really knew they could be. By the way, welcoming everybody in. If anybody wants to actually join this conversation, please do. I think the more people we hear from, the better today. So if you want to click that little button in the bottom left, the request to speak button, then please do and join this conversation. But in the meantime, I'm going to carry on reading through and trying to summarize some of these points in the verdict today. So Heidi Connor said, quote, "It is clear there is no training or guidance in this respect." So there's no training or guidance given on pausing inspections. That's what Heidi Connor said. I've now got the wonderful Stephen Tierney joining me. Stephen, what is your... I know you haven't had a chance to read through. If you want to unmute bottom left on your screen. I know you probably haven't had time to read through the full extent of this, but what is your immediate reaction? Hopefully you can click unmute on the bottom left of your screen if you're on a phone. Let me try unmuting you. Oh, I can't. Okay, well, we'll come back to you in a second. Hopefully I can unmute you in a bit. Also got Mike as well, who's hopefully coming in and joining us. I'll just read through a bit more. This bit about the training materials. There's no training or guidance on pausing inspections. And to quote what Branwen Jeffries, BBC editor, said just earlier, she said, "Neither the school or the local authority were aware a pause was a possibility. In fact, the inspection team was not likely to be aware," says Heidi Connor. She says this is indeed a mythical creature, quote, created and elaborated on in Ofsted. She then moved on to the secrecy around draft judgments. She said it was clear Ruth Perry thought she could not talk to anyone, even a mental health professional, and quotes from a recorded conversation where Ruth talked about the inhumane system. The senior coroner then turned to the local authority who were present today and talked about the power imbalance between them and a primary school and Ofsted. And there's a quote here, and I'm not sure from Branwen's commentary who this is from, but it says, "No one wished to rock the Ofsted boat." There was a desire to not make things worse for all Reading schools. And I guess that sort of touches on what Dave McPartlin was just saying to me a few minutes ago. This idea they didn't want to rock the boat because it might impact the judgments that they might receive in the future, which is incredible. It's not incredible in the sense they think that, but it is a written confirmation of the fear and the impact, if you like, of this judgment system. In that the council and other people thought we better stay quiet because because otherwise this could impact our future inspection grades. That seems to be the implication. I welcome any other commentary on it. I'm going to continue reading through all this, by the way, in the course of this space, but I'll just bring in Mike, who's been waiting very patiently. Mike, do you have anything to say on this? You can unmute in the bottom left.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Do you know what I do? I do.
Yeah.
So Ruth's passing really touched me in many other ways. So whenever I hear of anyone's passing in this manner, it really hits to my core for various personal circumstances which had happened in a previous life. But I think Ruth's one, and you mentioned the other 9 deaths which have been allegedly caused by the president of Ofsted. This one really got to me, and I couldn't let this one go in terms of processing and just wondering how and why this happened. I'm a director of music at a
Yeah.
school, and I also worked in other schools where I've worked quite closely with SLT as a music teacher does in terms of what we do. And I've seen many different. I've seen kind of the spectrum, if you will, of inspections. I've seen the best of the best and the worst of the worst, and I'm really glad we're having this conversation. And if anything, from this inquest, I am absolutely 1000% committed, hoping that this will make a change, not only for the head teachers who are obviously under an immense amount of pressure, but for those helping them to support them, and also, like you say, get us out of this bubble, like thinking that Ofsted are the be all and end all, and we have to curtail to them, because if we go against them, it will be worse. And it's just such a shame that it's taken Ruth's passing for this conversation to start, and for the widespread media attention. I wish it wasn't that case, and I wish Ruth could have been here to contribute to this, to change the system. But just reading the inquest and reading all of the notes that have been sent on Twitter and online, it just absolutely there are no words. I
Yeah.
get
So
really emotional.
just to cut in there, Bramwin Jeffries has just messaged me to say that tonight there's going to be a 30-minute film available on BBC iPlayer about today. So that's going to be published tonight on BBC iPlayer. It's going to be a 30-minute documentary, essentially, on what's gone on. So definitely stay tuned for that. She's also asked me to point everyone to the notes that are available, and she's just literally published these on her X account about 6 minutes ago. It's also on the BBC website, and the title is Inadequate, and it's Ruth Perry's notes from the inspection itself. So I haven't had a chance to read these yet. I don't know if anybody has. Have you read them, Mike? I haven't read them yet.
No, no. Well, thank you for bringing them to my attention. I haven't, but I certainly will. Certainly will by today.
Yeah, they're there anyway. And oh dear, I'm just having a quick look now. They've highlighted some of the statements in her notes. So she said things like, I wake from restless sleep, absolutely panic stricken. She says, I'm sorry that I've let you down, in one of the notes. She says the pain inside is intolerable, in one of her notes. She says, I've not been able to find any joy in Christmas preparations. I walk into a shop and cannot face buying anything, in her notes. This is appalling stuff. It really is appalling. And do you know what? Dave made a really good point a few moments ago when he said that this is happening to lots of different people. Absolutely tragic what happened to Ruth Perry. This is happening to other people now. Other people
Yeah.
now are going through these same experiences. That's absolutely clear from all the surveys, from the unions, and from everybody else. It's clear that these things are happening now. Nothing has changed. So anyway, I've got Hannah and Ross. Mike, thank you so much. Stay on as a speaker. Feel free. I might pop back to you if you're still here
Thank
to
you.
sort of share thoughts. So do stay on. I'll go to Ross. Ross, are you there?
Hey, Tom.
Hi. How are you?
Yeah, I'm personally okay. Just reading all the
Yeah.
stories, but I guess for everyone else listening, I left the teaching profession simply because my last school was put in special measures, and I guess, looking at Ruth's story, I'm still here, I suppose, to put it bluntly. You'll know I published on my blog just this weekend 2 audio files that I recorded at the time when our school went through special measures. And I won't necessarily go into the details of all the other staff around me, but essentially my leadership team disappeared pretty swiftly. And having been in this position before, I decided it was time to look after myself and do something differently. So I'm not surprised by anything that's being published, and just looking at the notes here on the website, published from Ruth's diary.
Yeah.
It's an absolute tragedy, but I'm not surprised, and it will happen again. And I know, the statistics, 5-10% of schools in that kind of sharp end of the wedge. It will continue to happen. And well, I guess we've got this difficult question to ask, outside of the teaching profession, but for parents, politicians, whoever, is, do we still want to grade schools? And I guess will determine if this is a reliable method for judging quality of education. Because you're going to get a lot of people say yes, a lot of people that say no, and whatever system we end up with, there is a consequence for teacher mental health, and it's a hard job, full stop. But then when you've got this enormous pressure on the shoulders of one person at the top, I don't think it doesn't matter what you could pay someone. I'd never. There was one reason why I didn't step up to headship.
Yeah.
So without rambling on, it's just a tragedy, and it's sad that it's taken Ruth Perry's death to get to this point where we've got national attention on the issue. And just to remind everyone else, Estins have just abandoned grades last academic year. There's been no outcry. There's been no drop in standards over in Wales. ISAMS, the Church of England body, who have 1 million kids in their schools, abandoned it last year too. Some of our highest performing systems in the world, Singapore and Finland, they have inspections, but they don't publish grades to the general public. And they, look at the PISA tables, if you believe in all that stuff, published this week. We've got some important things to do. So, Martin Oliver coming in January, fingers crossed. But it's, I've read this for a long time, a lot of the research on Ofsted since I went through this myself, and it was traumatic. But digging into legislation, it's quite simply Ofsted's HMCI can choose how to report to the government, and that's all it says in the legislation published in 1992. I've read every word. That's what it says. So currently, Ofsted choose to report in the grading fashions, and Wilshire before chose his terminology and all sorts of things. So it's a choice, and it's a political decision.
Absolutely. I mean, stay there, Ross, if you can. But if not, don't worry about it. I'm just going to go and see if we can get Stephen on. Stephen, if you want to try unmuting yourself.
Hi, Tom. I think I might have sorted it now.
Yeah.
Apologies.
You're there. What I know you haven't had a chance to read through, like everyone else, the full extent of this. I mean, I've read various different accounts of what was said from the BBC, from Schools Week, and all these other people. What's your initial reaction to this whole thing?
There's one of just immense sadness. It's a little bit like Ross was saying in terms of why did we have to come to this point? Why is it that people are, if you like, losing their lives? Because there's no bringing Ruth back. No matter what happens, what change we see, there's no bringing back that person. The loss that family must be feeling at the minute is there, and it's about how do we try and get some good out of the bad. Because, you look at this situation and you struggle sometimes to see what is good in it. And I do struggle, but maybe there's some good that could come out of it. There's not much I can do for the family. They will cope with their loss. And I think that they have shown, just such a depth of understanding of the issues and a dignity in what they've done throughout, but also a persistence that was important as well.
Yeah, I mean, just on the point of what will change now, What would you like to happen now, Stephen, from your perspective? Right now, I mean.
I think there's a number of things. I'm not convinced, and I think there's been a level of hubris from Ofsted as an organisation, almost since its inception in some ways, but some of the comments recently. And I would just urge people to stay away from individuals who work for Ofsted and to think about it as an organisation. The issues are systemic. So it's not about the individuals, and we mustn't be in a situation where I think we're putting unnecessary pressure or making comments about the individuals. It's about the organisation. And I think
there would be those Stephen, who would say that you make a choice to work for Ofsted. So therefore, the moment you make a choice to do that at whatever level you're at, inspector, chief inspector, whatever, you're making a choice. You're making an active choice.
I do, but Tom, could you imagine if something happened to one of those people, one of those individuals? And it's almost like, whilst accepting people made choices.
You're talking about you're talking about the specific team who carried out this inspection. Is that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean that.
Because I didn't pick that up. Sorry, I understand what you're saying more now.
Yeah. Yes. So I just think that great care is needed, but I'm not convinced that Ofsted can reform itself. I think there's going to have to be a white. So if we leave it to Ofsted, I don't think much will happen. They'll play around the edges. There's something much more systemic. So what could people do now? Well, if we go back a number of years, and it's kind of 3 years ago now, I think, possibly approaching 4. One of the things that we called for is for people to just pause Ofsted. And part of the pausing Ofsted is sometimes you just need space to think and reflect and to go through some of those proposals. So there's loads of people who are currently in schools who are working for Ofsted, and they might just say, well, I'm just going to pause and make myself unavailable for 6 or 12 months. Partly because of how I feel about this situation, but partly because I know that will lead, when they haven't got enough inspectors to do the work, to people having to think. And there's certain things, I've always been clear, we need the level of accountability that we get from that external scrutiny. What that is the debate. And so things like safeguarding, and that was central to this, it is not an inspection issue, it's an audit issue. And so we need to think about aspects of this. And this goes back to what Heads Round Table was saying 4 or 5 years ago. And the beauty of working for Heads Round Table and working with the people there is partly you got different thinking, but partly we could just say things. We could, we didn't have to think about whether we were representing people or an organisation that needed to be working with secretaries of states and ministers and all the rest of it. We could just say, this is what we think, and this is what we think from our positions.
Yeah.
And so this issue of thinking through, how do we ensure people are safeguarded? And to be blunt, somebody coming in for what amounts to probably about 12 working hours every 3 or 4 years is just an utterly inadequate way to think about safeguarding. It's a continual iterative process of internal scrutiny, allied with some external scrutiny, issues identified that need to be resolved, those done in a timely way, people coming back, and more internal scrutiny and external scrutiny. And there's processes, if you think about financial audits, which many of us will be familiar with, there's processes that we put in place as a trust for the 3 schools within the trust. Going back, I found a block from 2015 where we had the local authority coming into the trust, looking at our work on safeguarding and making recommendations to us, which went to governors. And then we reacted and responded on them, and then they came back. And that, to me, so there's things that if we give space to think, we can actually do something about.
Ross, I'll just nip back to you on what Stephen said, if you've got any further sort of comment on what he said. I mean, in terms for yourself, in terms of what the way forward should now be with Ofsted. What should happen to Ofsted? Need to unmute, Ross, if you're still there. There you are.
Yeah. In what regard? Just generally, I mean, what Stephen
said.
Well,
what
there...
should happen? Should Ofsted be abolished? Should it be replaced? Should it be paused? Should it be reformed? What is your view? Not what everyone's view is, but what's your personal view?
Okay, well,
on this?
you know, as you can imagine, I've thought very deeply about this and gone through all the trauma. And you know, Ruth Perry's story. I know not just myself. There's been many people messaging behind the scenes. It's brought a lot of trauma back for other people that have experienced an inadequate and special measures inspection too, and been forced out of the system. So my views have changed actually. So there's always been an inspection system. I think records go back a good couple of 100 years actually. You know, and there's a lot of money spent, and we've got 8.8 million kids in our system, and 500,000 teachers, and taxpayer money, and all sorts of things. So we need to have something, but we need an intelligent version of what we currently have. So I think for me, ultimately, we need the grading to be reformed. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I've always speculated around the kind of good or not yet good, and at least a kind of benchmark or something like that. As Stephen mentioned about the safeguarding, you know, I think that should be an annual process, but it could perhaps be a desktop check rather than a deep and you know, part of a complex inspection.
When you say desktop check, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's certain things you can do on you know, remotely, and you know, website checks and things like that, and logging in with someone through a remote connection such as Zoom or Teams, and then you'll have the physical process where you come in and do your deep dives and pop into classrooms. But there's a lot of kind of desk paperwork things that can be checked. You know, your DBS kind of records and all those kind of things. I, Trying to kind of go into, you know, people have to remember that it's not just schools. You know, we've got early years settings, nurseries, children in social care, prisons, apprenticeship providers, local authorities, and now initial teacher training. So there's a massive beast of a system beyond schools. And all those settings too also go through currently the same methodologies in some shape or format, and also the same grading process. So, you know, in our network, we're talking about teacher circumstances. I suspect there'll be the same conversations that happen in terms of workload and mental health and reliability in those other industries too, within the umbrella of Ofsted's remit. So, yeah.
So what do you want? You still haven't told me
Well,
what
right.
your
Okay.
thing
Well,
is.
what do I want? Well, that is a good thing. So I think we need to increase Ofsted funding first of all, because they're underfunded. Their budget's gone down dramatically, so their resources are more thinly spread. I think there needs to be a larger number of inspectors available to support schools. There need to be qualified counsellors and psychologists as part of the inspection process. I think school leaders also need to be part of that. I think conflicts for interest also have to be managed. I've mentioned the desktop safeguarding check, the kind of reformation of gradings, perhaps thematic inspections. You know, when I qualified 20 odd 5 years ago, it was a 6 week process. Someone was with you for a week. And it was, and by the end, you were kind of not best friends, but you really understood each other's circumstances. And it was an entirely different process. And you left knowing exactly what you needed to do, and it wasn't as threatening. You know, and I was a very young teacher then, so whether the kind of headaches behind the scenes of leadership, I couldn't comment on that. A couple of other things, I suppose, just to finish. You know, that MOT period. So, you know, when I take my car in to get fixed, I get some kind of warnings, and I can get some advisories, and I get a period of time to fix it before I get another inspection before that final grade. So, you know, something that could happen. When I met Sean Harford, you know, going back to 2014, we were talking then about a collaborative hub network. That's still not happened. We've got Ofsted conducting its own research and, you know, measuring itself and publishing its own findings. So, you know, the kind of tail wagging the dog kind of system we're getting into. So the geographics and the hubs need to be looked at again. Ofsted also have a purpose to serve illegal schools. There's a network of this across our country. We still have 100,000 plus students not on official registers. We don't know where they are, and we're in a first world country, so we need inspection in some shape or form. So, you know, back in the day, I would have called for an absolute abolition of Ofsted, but I've softened a little bit as my research and lens has got a bit wider. But I guess the final point is the progress measures. constantly measuring apples and pears and then comparing. It's just not very reliable. But I guess we have to do something on that one, and that probably needs another conversation.
Yeah, Ross, thanks so much. I'm going to go to Hannah now next. Hannah, any thoughts on anything regarding the Ruth Perry verdict?
I just want to say a big shout out to the chap, I've forgotten his name now, who did the whole entire kind of chat and descriptions every day of what was going on. It was.
Oh, that's Edmund.
Yes.
That is Edmund.
It was
Yes,
like being in the room and kind of the things he was saying, and like you said earlier about the whole point of, we didn't know that you could stop an inspection, but it was kind of insinuated that actually you kind of just take that person out of the equation and continue on with somebody else, and you don't want to put that onto your team, so you kind of power through it. And I just think that I really hope that Ofsted don't just kind of go, oh, let's have some mental health training for the staff so they're more responsive, and that's all that changes. I think it needs to be a much bigger change to that. Like, somebody has lost their life, and it's time for teachers to kind of find their voice and say how it needs to change. It needs to be a better system. The what is there just doesn't work anymore, and this is the point where it has to change.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Bet UK is empowering the everyday wins, cheeky grins, big conversations, budding aspirations. Our goal? To make EdTech accessible and teaching exceptional. Join the global education community on the 24th to the 26th of January 2024 as we make education better together. Ticket off your Christmas list today. Get your free ticket before the 13th of December deadline. Visit www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
Well, you say it has to change, that there will still be, I'm sure, who knows what's going to happen now. In the last year, very little has changed so far. So I don't know whether this is going to finally be something that actually drives change. So it will be interesting to see that. There will be those out there who will say nothing's going to change it, regardless of what's going to happen. There will be those out there who are actually saying we don't want it to change. I think Dave sort of touched on this earlier as a head teacher, saying that he was saying that some people still get a lot out of the system. And that could be a bit of a problem. Is that I don't really know what's going to happen next with this. It's going to be really, really interesting to see, because it is landmark. I think I mentioned earlier that 10 people or something like that have died. They alleged as a result of Ofsted inspections since they began, something like that. Lots of leaders, people, and I think this is the first time where it's actually come out in this way, and it's actually been linked directly to an Ofsted inspection on, a sort of, I don't know if legal basis is the right word, but an official basis, let's say,
And I think the Amanda Spillman kind of Women's Hour chat just shows how out of touch they were with the effect that they're having. And that's the thing that everyone's kind of really responded to, that they just haven't got a clue that they've had this effect on. And it's not just her, it's so many teachers.
Absolutely. Mike, I wonder whether you wanted to throw anything else into this chat. By the way, anybody listening now, we've got quite a few. If you would like to get involved in this conversation, and Tom, I do apologise I couldn't connect you up there. Well, I was going to, but I think you've probably gonna have to teach. So sorry for that. But anybody else who wants to join in, just click the little icon in the bottom left-hand side, and you can get involved in this conversation. We are, of course, talking about the verdict from the coroner's report into Ruth Perry, which came out a couple of hours ago. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this will be available as a podcast, of course, to listen back to as well later on today. Mike, do you have any further thoughts on this?
Yeah, just listening to everyone's contributions, and it's great to hear everyone's point of view about should the current system be scrapped or should it not. And I mean, going back to I've forgotten who mentioned it, but saying that there are people that get a lot out of the system. My argument to that is, well, 10 people have died allegedly as a result of this. So if they are getting a lot out of it, at what price do we pay to keep it as it is? It's for me, one death is too many, and if it's 10, we've gone beyond the point of speculation, and now drastic action needs to be changed. My other point was, it's all well and true, kind of us talking about this as educators. I think this message, and I think the need for change and the need to change how schools are inspected and making them a lot more fairer in terms of the people that work in the schools, is appealing to the hearts and minds of the public and the parents and the policymakers. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we need to show the people outside of education, you know, we are working within the system. You know, we have all of these day-to-day issues that we experience often every term. We need to let people understand that this system is absolutely not working, and we need people on our side to understand this and also to rally to make changes, not abolish, because I agree that there should be some form of inspection system which is robust but also helpful, considerate, and empowering. And that change needs to come from not only us, but for people on the outside too, to say, hey, we cannot have this. We cannot have the educators that serve the country's children go through anything close to this. Because I don't know about you, but no job is worth this. No job is worth your life, your well-being. It really isn't. When I started training, you know, I knew it was going to be a tough profession, but never to the point where you really have to consider things like, I need to leave this profession because if I don't, something might happen. And that's absolutely disgusting. No job is worth it. No job is worth it. So I think appealing to people on the outside and letting them know what's going on, and for them to put the right kind of pressure in order to make the changes that we know could have a better impact on how we can best serve our students, but also best serve the education community is absolutely paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier that the notes, Ruth Perry's own notes, have been published by the BBC. If you want to find those, they're pinned by the education editor at the BBC, Bronwyn Jeffries, on X. So if you want to have a read of those notes, they really are. I mean, trigger warning on it, because I've just read bits of it, and it is awful. To be fair, it's absolutely awful. There's no other words really to describe the things she's written down and how she was obviously feeling, and all these different things, and the family and how they were reading it, and it's just terrible. And I suppose the question is, what do Ofsted want to have? I mean, what I don't understand in this yet, and I suppose nobody does really know right now, but now, what's Amanda Spielman thinking? What is the Ofsted leadership thinking in this situation? Are they? Has she changed her view that people in the profession are using this as a pivot to criticise Ofsted, to quote her, or, you know, does she still stand by that view? Has she changed her view? Is it, you know, maybe we're not going to hear anything because she is departing as chief inspector. Presumably, a lot of the leadership. I know Chris Russell, the national director, is also moving on. So there is a change in personnel. And, you know, I've seen people criticising that online, saying, you know, the reason they're changing the personnel is so they can move this tragedy away from the next set of leaders and then hopefully carry on as if nothing has happened. So I don't know what's going to happen next, Mike, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure the political ramifications of all of this, and it's, you know, it's quite disheartening to think that that's kind of going to be the plan in terms of what could potentially happen. I would hope that there'll be enough humanity in the organization to at least admit their culpability of all of this, that as the inquest has came out with, but also just say, okay, now we do need to change. I'm pretty certain that all of the things that have happened in terms of how Ofsted are perceived and all of the effects that have had on education, I'm pretty certain that this isn't deliberate. I think people have gone and decided how things should be in the best of intentions. What they perhaps I feel like they may be guilty of is not at listening historically to the educators and the people who are working on the ground and giving them the feedback in which they could take and amend, like we all do as educators. We take feedback and we're always refining what we do. I sincerely hope that they look at this and they can also take a look at themselves and say, right, well, how can we do this better? And if it's a case of um, if it's a case of highlighting and publishing that the inspections can stop at any moment if there is any duress, fine.
Yeah, because I
But
mean
if
that
the
was a
case
key part I thought of the feedback
mm,
today from the coroner was they, the local authority, the school, you know, Ruth Perry herself, the SLT, no one knew that the inspection could be paused. No one really had any concept of that, and I think that's a key thing, isn't it? That's a key
mm,
part of this. That, you know, we think back to events earlier this year when, you know, the Flora Cooper school bit, whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
where, you know, and other head teachers basically saying, you know, can we stop Ofsted from coming in? Can we, you know, do X, Y, Z? Well, you know, according to what we've heard today, yes, they can. They can request a pause of an inspection if there are circumstances like this happening. But the one thing, and this is my personal view here coming into it, not the view of TTR. This is Tom. And as much as I like, Ross, what you were saying, a lot of what you were saying, yeah, it sounds great. My question is, unless we do something radical, I feel like the core things, the gradings, the, you know, the really core parts of it at the moment, they need to change. And unless there's a real radical sort of slice down the middle of Ofsted, you know, to really change it and reform it, just feel like it's just going to be piecemeal changes. But that might be my cynicism talking and my reaction to maybe the way things have gone up to this point that makes me think that. Do you know what I mean?
mm, yeah,
Only because I think people have battled for change a long time before the death of Ruth Perry. People were still battling for changes in the way things were done. We had a new inspection framework. We had, you know, all these different things, changes in leadership, whatever. But ultimately, think the core things around Ofsted inspections have remained what they've always been, which is the 4-word judgments, the 2-day inspection, the windows, if you like, however long those windows have been. You know, those things have always been there. So it will be interesting to see on the back of this verdict what changes. We've got a few minutes left. If anybody else wants to share their view at this point, then just click the little button in the bottom left, the little mic button, to get involved in this conversation tonight at 7:30. Again on Spaces, same location. We've got Brent Poland and Adam Spence, who will be drilling down into the verdict from the coroner in much more detail than we've done in the last hour. So if you want to tune into that, that's 7:30 tonight on TTR live on Spaces. So you can just go to the TTR official account, which you're on now, and then you can listen from 7:30 to them, sort of drilling down into the finer details of what the coroner has said, the implications, the legacy that could come about because of this. As I said earlier, there's been lots and lots of tragedies relating to Ofsted inspections, but I think this is the first time that it's received this amount of attention, but B, it's got to the level it's got to, where there has actually been a coroner's report and the coroner's report has judged that the Ofsted inspection contributed towards this person's death. So I think it's unprecedented. We have got one more speaker coming in, so I'll just see if this person wants to connect. If they can, it looks like it's saying connecting on there, so maybe not. Oh, yeah. Hello, it's London something. London, do you want to say something on this? Just need to unmute bottom left. Should be a little button bottom left that allows you to unmute. There we go.
Apologies. First time into one of these discussions, and it's very absorbing. Great listen. We've been quite involved in Ofsted, albeit remotely, not least with the primary PE and Sport Premium. But reading into this, and obviously, you know, the focus on Ruth Perry, and let's not forget the at least about another 9 cases that have been reported of senior leaders who sadly, how can I put it, gave their lives as a result of...
Have lost their lives.
Lost their lives. That's a far better way of putting it. What I feel is kind of missing from this conversation slightly is that Ofsted is a quango. It's a government quango. So at what point should the DfE and the government have some responsibility over this?
Well, quite. I mean, I've heard, you know, the sort of, I wouldn't call them defenders of Ofsted, but the people who have sort of tried to, if you like, keep the status quo, have pointed to the fact that, and Spielman said this herself, she said, we can't reform ourselves, it has to come from government.
Absolutely.
It has to come from the Department of Education. Yeah. Now, I don't, again, personal view only here, I don't necessarily buy that in the sense of, if Ofsted went cap in hand to the DfE and said, we need to change and here is our proposal to change, then I think the DfE would probably go along with it in some way, shape or form. What's actually happening is Ofsted are saying, you know, from what we're seeing anyway, I don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but, you know, we are getting a lot of stuff from Ofsted of saying, we're quite happy with the way things are working. And then the DfE are thinking, well, if Ofsted are happy with it, then it puts the emphasis on the DfE to then have to take an action almost against Ofsted rather than with Ofsted. And that's, so I think you are correct in saying that what you're saying is that, you know, the DfE would need to change this. They're the ones who need to shut Ofsted down. They're the ones who might need to reform or pause Ofsted or whatever. You know, it's the DfE who would need to do that. But again, you know, it's almost like saying, I always think of sort of, you know, it's almost like a football club. They've got to, you know, thinking of an analogy with the Premier League and football clubs, it's like the football clubs have a responsibility as well. And you know, it's not just the Premier League, it's the football clubs themselves have a responsibility to the profession, to the footballing profession. A little bit like Ofsted saying, Ofsted surely have a responsibility to the profession which they serve. And I think it's interesting to coin things in that way. Ofsted as a server of the profession rather than sort of a punitive body. They should be helping the profession, supporting the profession, serving the profession. Whereas, you know, many critics would say that their role has dwelt way beyond that, and it's almost become something that it shouldn't be. So I don't know what you think of all of that.
Well, I just generally reading around Ofsted's behaviour, I mean, are there elements that come into play? We're clearly looking at past and present appointments that are politically motivated. And the issue we have with that, I mean, Spielman's own background is hardly rooted to education before she took on this appointment. And I don't need to tell you, and I don't need to tell your listeners, because there's plenty of information in the open domain, that there are other business agendas taking place where inspection's concerned, not least the culture of further conversion to multi-academy trusts. So when it comes to the fact that far greater aspects of education, such as health and well-being, are concerned. They are not, despite what assertions Ofsted would make, they're not front and ahead of inspection concerns whatsoever, and you can tell that by the quality of the reportage within various schools' reports. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the reports themselves, we can see so many examples in
Barely anything in them.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing that was interesting a few weeks ago, somebody posted, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was, but somebody posted, I think it was Sarah, actually, who was on TCR, actually, a couple of weeks ago. Sarah posted a section from an Ofsted report, and it was a narrative from an Ofsted report. And then she asked people to guess the judgment the school got. 85%, something like that, maybe even 90%. Didn't guess correctly at what judgment that school got. In fact, the school was rated requires improvement. I think 85% of people thought that it was going to say that the school was good. So sometimes the narratives don't match up. Obviously, Ofsted came out a few weeks ago, Amanda Spielman on Radio 4. She said that I think it's something like 89%. Ross will correct me on this. He probably knows better than me. It's something like 89% of schools are currently rated good or better. So it's almost like you sort of, I guess, one of the defences that maybe Ofsted and others might use is, well, if so many schools are good or better, therefore that's sort of an argument the system's working. They're saying there's more good and outstanding schools, so therefore the system is working better, right?
I'd love to see a breakdown of those local maintained schools rated good, outstanding, compared to the MATs. I really would.
Yeah, I mean, again, is that's sort of another issue, is the politicization of it.
I'm not anti-MAT at all. I mean, it's just the fact that there is definitely a political agenda taking place behind the scenes here, and does that therefore have ramifications for a level playing field and being fair on all the head teachers being observed?
No, it's a really, really, really good point. We've got Rupert in. Rupert, do you want to share your sort of thoughts and reaction on the Ruth Perry inquest verdict? Just need to unmute bottom left on your screen. Oh, maybe not. Rupert, are you on a mobile phone? Rupert, you need to be on a mobile phone through the X app if you want to actually be able to speak. If you are on that already, then just click the unmute button. If you're not, you can pop back out and come back into the space if you want, and then share your thoughts on things. Welcome, everybody, by the way. You're listening to Teachers Talk Radio, and we will publish this discussion as a podcast. So if you do listen to podcasts, give us a follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to them. And you can download this podcast and listen back if you want to catch up on the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or whatever it was. We've had Stephen Tierney, former member of the Education Roundtable, or Head Teachers Roundtable, has been on. We've had Ross, who's still here, I think. We've had Hannah. We've had 7 or 8 sort of contributors to the discussion. Of course, it would be lovely to hear from you. And also London. London, what is your real name? What's your first name?
I'm sorry.
What was that?
I'm Giles.
Giles. Well, Giles, you've made some
I had a mouthful of sushi.
That's okay.
This is my lunch break.
Very pertinent points. So I mean, if you want to join the conversation, you just have to click the little icon in the bottom left, request to speak, and then we can hopefully get you in. To do that, you need to be on a mobile phone through the X app. Of course, you are welcome to just listen to this, as many of you have been since the beginning, and that's absolutely fine. But if you would like to have your say, then you can do by clicking that icon in the bottom left, and we will bring you in as a speaker. Just to finish off, we've got a little bit of time left. We've sort of, this conversation's flowed so much that it's just, I mean, we could talk about this all afternoon and probably all night. I know Brent and Adam will be on at 7:30 tonight. So if you feel like you can't chat now, but you'd like to chat about this later, then definitely tune into that 7:30 tonight. It'll be in exactly the same place on X Spaces here. Ross, is that you unmuting yourself?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I guess one final point from me.
Yeah.
It's politics, pure and simple. You know, power and
Absolutely.
influence. You break down England by its local authorities, and you've got all your MPs representing.
Yep.
You know, if I was a local MP and I could say, since I've been in power, I've got 7 more schools that are good or outstanding because of our policy decisions, then it's an easy thing to say. And obviously, when you move the benchmarks and then again say, oh, since we did X, we've now got even more. And all sorts. It's just a nice, easy win for politicians. And I think this is the nub of some of the things I said earlier about how we should reform Ofsted in the future, breaking it down into what is the thing that just keeps reoccurring time and time again. It is that grading
Yeah,
methodology. And so
absolutely.
it has to come up to Parliament. It has to be a discussion on every MP, so people might be listening to this, or it might be spread a bit widely, right into local MPs, all those kind of things. I think it's important to remember, Ofsted doesn't belong to the government. Or even the Department for Education. It belongs to all of us. So whether you're a teacher, a parent, a student, or whatever it might be, we all have a right to express our opinions. And Ofsted sometimes tries to shut down that noise online and say that we're trying to spread anxiety and all those. But the cases of Ruth Perry, my own, and lots of other people out there who have lived the sharp end of the wedge. It's very difficult for people who've not had that lived experience to understand where we're coming from. But the essence of democracy is hearing everyone's points of view. That freedom to think differently and openly. And if we want a genuine, transformative inspection system that doesn't instill fear, bullying, and all those kind of things, then we need to be honest, and we need to dig deep and look hard at how do we currently reform what we've currently got. 8.8 million kids, 22,000 schools, prisons, and all those kind of other areas that Ofsted are responsible for. How do we hold the education system to account as taxpayers? How does Ofsted report back accurately and reliably to the wider kind of society and to government? And again, there's things that they can and can't do or want to do. I think that's an important question to us all, and it's a big ask.
Yeah,
But I think if we break it down into what is the biggest thing that drives all this kind of marketization and competition and
yeah,
conflicts of interest, it's the grades. So for me, my final point, it's got to be looked at again.
yeah, absolutely. Rupert, hopefully you're connected now with a bit of
I
luck.
am. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah, can hear you loud and clear.
Great. So sorry about that, and sorry to come in a little late. I've been trying to absorb everything, and so I'm not aware of everything you've said before. My apologies.
Well, we've essentially what we've done so far is just talked about the verdict. We've sort of outlined the key points from it. Everyone could read those anyway via BBC Schools Week, TES, anywhere.
Yeah.
But we've basically been talking about those and getting people's reaction really to it. So what's your reaction, Rupert?
Sure.
To this?
I guess I'm pleasantly surprised by the strength of the finding, the sheer existence of. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you loud.
Just the existence of neutral enough systems of thought and accountability to be able to come to this decision in a way that isn't directly shaped by government voices and government interests, and how rare those spaces are within education at the moment. This is a very rare sort of wake-up call, as it were, to the teaching profession from outside a very small range of voices that get to speak with authority on what's happening in education. So I welcome it from that perspective, however hard it's been for all of those involved.
Do you think, though, Rupert, because you mentioned sort of politics and whatever, and I can't presume to know your sort of own personal politics, but with Labour's sort of ideas, let's call them, about a report card, is this sort of just circling round? And is this more a wider political problem and a systemic problem rather than a Conservative Party problem?
I think so. I mean, I think, if you go back to the 1980s, 1990s reforms through which, the curriculum was formed, through which Ofsted and its predecessors were formed. Obviously you had that an intense period, but really the pressure to perform and to narrow and both narrow the criteria for performance and increasingly to centralize the focus on what should be studied through the literacy and numeracy strategies, for example, which continue to profoundly shape primary schools today. It's been ongoing through all governments for the last 40 years, and there is a possibility and a moment here to step back and think about what the moral purpose is of schools. Part of the reason I asked to speak was I'm currently writing. I'm an academic. I'm at UCL, and I'm currently writing an article on having interviewed 10 head teachers in primary schools, looking at their perspective on climate change education. And the reason I think that's relevant is this is clearly a moral issue to which they feel a strong moral pull, to which they see children, parents, the community have a strong moral pull, and they are torn apart by the dilemmas that they face around finding time, space, initiative, energy to dedicate to these things that they know are of importance but are not valued by the assessment system, and they don't exist sufficiently in the curriculum. And these moral dilemmas within heads between the promise of the role as something where they can lead in a community to build a place where people are feel fulfilled and purposeful and happy. On the one hand, they see that that's possible, or that is a possibility. And on the other hand, an increasing level of restriction, demand, and sheer breadth of tasks, including managerial and management tasks that they have to do. And that gap is becoming increasingly difficult for them to reconcile, and it causes huge mental stress. And I think what we've seen here is, through this inquiry, is those inspections merely are a sort of a grounding, a touchstone, if you like, or what would you call it, like a lightning rod, where those tensions suddenly come to a head between the moral purpose and direction they want to give in leading a school and what they find that they have to do.
No, some really interesting points there. I know we've got Brian here. I've just requested Brian and see if he wants to say anything on this as former General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. Thanks to everyone who's contributed to this conversation for the last sort of hour and 20 minutes. It's been really, really interesting. Anyone who's sort of just joined now, you can listen back to it either here or we'll publish it as a podcast imminently via Teachers Talk Radio on any podcast platform that you subscribe to. So if you want to sort of catch up to it there, then you can do. Massive thanks to everyone who's contributed. It could be a monumental day in the history of Ofsted, the history of school inspection, the history of school accountability. If what we're reading is anything to go by, then it could be a massive day. I know tonight Brent will be on at 7:30 p.m. On TTR, so I've just pinned that to the space there. So if anybody wants to sort of listen to that one, then it'll be 7:30 tonight. Thanks everybody, and speak to you soon.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.